I'm glad you've pointed that out, because really as a channel, it should be generating a return. It's not just for vanity's purpose, right? It's not just because you want to look good telling your friends that you're ranking number 1 in the SERPs. Like any good marketing channel, it should be trackable, and you should be able to, sort of corroborate that activity back to business returns. Google really hasn't given us any, keyword data inside Google Analytics for SEO. So you can't see which are your converting terms. But of course, with paid search, you can. So it's a really great idea, out of the gate to test your market with paid search, find out which terms are most responsive. They don't just want a content piece to necessarily answer the user's initial query. They want that content to answer the initial query and then all related queries that the user may have as a result of typing in the first. If we start to think about probably some of our own consumer habits, they have changed. So I don't know what you're like, but perhaps if you're looking for something like a cafe or a restaurant, you may not turn to Google, you might go to TikTok, or even perhaps to Instagram.
Yeah. Hi James, how are you?
Good, Ibrahim, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming. Welcome to Below the Fold.
Appreciate it, happy to be here.
Why don't you give us a quick intro for our listeners and viewers?
Yes, absolutely. So my name's James. As we have said, my area of kind of specialization and expertise for the last decade or so has been in search engine optimization and inbound marketing in general. Currently own and operate an agency called SEO Sherpa, which, as the name may describe, is an SEO agency. We've been in the game since 2012 and currently are the Global Search Awards Best Large SEO Agency for 2023. So that really ranks us as one of the best, maybe even the best agency kind of in our space globally. So yeah, SEO is what I do day in, day out. Aside from that, British, born and raised in a very kind of sleepy part of the UK, to a copywriting father and an artist mother. So definitely I've got creativity in my genes. Growing up was really into sports. So I'm very kind of competitive, a bit of an A-type go-getter, and eventually kind of found my way to marketing through a photography job. That was my first and only job at the time. And whilst I had a lot of interest in becoming a photographer, the owners had a different idea, and they decided I was better in the role of kind of marketing, sales and management. So around the turn of the century, which sounds like a long time ago now, I got into the space of marketing, originally with like direct response marketing, following people like Dan Kennedy and others like that, eventually into digital, which was a few years later. And then from there, eventually found my way into, sort of marketing consultancy, and then eventually SEO. And that's ultimately how we kind of find ourselves at this point, 20 plus years later.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And when you say photography, were you doing content creation for a website, or what was it for?
Well, it's almost before the time of websites when I first got started into photography, which kind of shows my age a little bit. But no, we were doing sort of black and white family portraits. They were kind of all of the craze, in those days. A little bit of wedding and commercial photography. But when I started in that job, I was a photographer's assistant. So carried reflectors, framed portraits, made teas and coffees, those sorts of things. Yeah,
I'm sure you can still make use of those skills today in content, I suppose. Maybe you still have an eye for what could work.
I think so, yeah. Good eye for kind of angles and like content structure and formation, lighting, these types of things.
Okay, there you go.
Definitely has its uses, and even in what I'm doing these days.
And for those that don't know, a Sherpa is someone that does the heavy weight lifting for you, right? When you're about to climb up a big mountain, right?
Yeah, so the Sherpas are native to Nepal, and anyone that's looking to climb Mount Everest would typically have a Sherpa that's climbing alongside them, and ultimately actually the Sherpas kind of do all of the hard work, as you've said. And these kind of Westerners that come in to ascend Everest, they're basically guided and shown how to ascend the mountain by the native Sherpas of Nepal. So it's really a metaphor for us. It's a metaphor for climbing. So Sherpas help climbers climb Mount Everest. We help our clients climb the ranks of Google. So that's how the name came about.
Excellent. I like
Yeah.
that. And we're here to talk about SEO.
Yes.
Okay, we're here to zero down on SEO. I guess the first question that comes to mind is I wanted to get your input on how have you seen the SEO landscape change over the years?
Yeah.
And maybe potentially you can also tell me or tell the viewers and listeners a little about where do you think will be or what is the next big shift when it comes to SEO?
Yeah, well, it's an industry that changes a lot. So there's going to be a lot of evolution, but there's also been a lot of change in the time that I've been in SEO. So I got started around 2010. 2012 is when the agency was born. And back then, Google was just literally a listing of 10 blue links, pointed off to web results. Yeah. And of course, the SERPs that we see nowadays are very, very different. So we went from just web links to universal search, which is what we describe as being, sort of multi-vertical search. So, videos, images, and all of these other things coming into the SERPs themselves. From there, we then moved into sort of natural language processing and it being a little bit less about sort of matching keywords in documents to actually what users were really looking for behind the search. And now we kind of find ourselves in a position, at least with Google, where we've got a really diversified SERP listing. So if you go to Google now, you'll not just see links, you'll see knowledge panels, you'll see featured snippets, you'll see
retail.
Retail, yeah, exactly. Google shopping results and many, many other things. So really, the search results themselves have evolved as users' needs have evolved, and also according to how technology has evolved and the sorts of results that search engines like Google are now able to return. So it's a lot more complicated than it was in the past, and it's also much more competitive because now there is many different types of listings that brands are fighting after, whereas in the past it was literally just those web links, and of course there is so much more content out there now fighting for that limited real estate than there was in the past. So there's definitely been a lot of change. I think also as well, again, when we think about Google, they've become a lot more kind of nuanced and better able to evaluate what is a good result. So it's much more difficult now, for practitioners to kind of sort of cheat or manipulate their way to the top of the search results. Like you really have to now build a brand, produce great content, build credibility in order to get results in this day and age.
This is one of the points actually that I wanted us to touch on, which was how do you stay ahead of Google's algorithm updates, right? Which have a pretty significant impact on rankings, on SEO. What advice do you have for brands, right, to cope with these changes? Yeah,
well, I would certainly say if you're doing things right, you really shouldn't be too worried about it. And what that means is really you've got to be thinking user-centric as opposed to being search engine-centric. So if you are actually looking to solve users' problems, e.g. the queries that they're putting into the search engines with the best possible content, and then you're also looking to demonstrate to Google that you're an authority on that space, you really shouldn't have too many challenges. Where the challenges occur is when brands are trying to manipulate their way to the top of the search results by using practices that really they shouldn't do. So if you stay away from that stuff, which might be things like, buying links or creating content for users that's different to the content you create for search engines and all of this other kind of grey, shady stuff, you should be in a pretty good place. Now, with that said, I don't think you want to ignore major updates because the big algorithm updates that occur actually give you a good insight into really what Google is looking for. So if you can stay on top of those and understand the changes that come about, I think that can help sort of in general drive your strategy. But I wouldn't be too concerned or worried about them as long as you're doing things above board, really. Yes.
Right. And how do you keep track of these updates?
Well, the major ones are typically announced.
Yeah. Okay.
So anything kind of significant may even be announced ahead of time,
Okay.
right? So if there's significantly big new signals that Google is looking at, then they might tell webmasters about that ahead of time. So some things that we might mention in recent history would be things like Core Web Vitals, which is a bit of a fancy name for basically really the vital statistics on your website that are going to be good for users. So a fast loading time, a website that's stable and doesn't move about. Google announced that one was coming about probably 12 months ahead. So that enabled you, webmasters to actually get ahead and plan for that. Other things, though, typically are done retrospectively. So they might tell you that a core update has happened after the fact. Those updates are typically done to just improve the quality of the search results and to potentially eradicate web spam. So, if they've seen any kind of signals that, these dirty practitioners again are utilizing, they might add something to the algorithm filters to detect and automate that going forward. But again, if you're doing things above board, you probably shouldn't be too worried about those.
Right. And they're pretty consistent, right, with their announcements. So if they announce that something's going to change in 5 months, it comes in 5 months, right? You don't go ahead and prepare for those changes and then 3 months later they announce a different update.
Yeah, so
they
don't typically move it forward, but sometimes the development of these systems can take longer than they expect. So occasionally we'll find that a big update gets pushed back, but they don't normally surprise you and pull it ahead.
Right.
So at least Google's not great at many things, but at least in that sort of area they're pretty consistent.
Cool. And before we move to other channels other than Google, because we just spoke before we started this podcast about SEO being important or being applicable for other channels as well. Let's just talk a little bit more about what are other challenges that client face. So you've listed one. Is there any other challenge? Is one of them also accepting that maybe that SEO is not an immediate, doesn't have an immediate impact on ROI, for example? How do you deal with that? How do you set client expectations when it comes to return, right, from SEO?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you've pointed that out, because really as a channel, it should be generating a return. It's not just for vanity's purpose, right? It's not just because you want to look good telling your friends that you're ranking number one in the SERPs. Like any good marketing channel, it should be trackable, and you should be able to sort of corroborate that activity back to business returns, right? So for us at SEO Sherpa, there's kind of two main ways that we do it. Firstly is that we're really just maniacal about tracking ROI. So for every single client, we measure the ROI returns based upon industry classification and based upon time period. So because we've delivered now probably 500, different SEO retainers across, all of those brands. Yeah. So we've got a really big data source. So we can very often say, look, we've worked with other clients in your industry vertical who are in a similar position to you when they started. And it took us this degree of time in order to get there. So if all things else are equal, this should be the sort of time period that you might expect in order to get those same returns.
Right.
And then the other thing that we do is forecast. So whilst SEO isn't an exact science, you can of course get a lot of good data. So if you're experienced and you understand, okay, what keyword set can we go after? Where are we currently positioned? How long might it take in order for us to be ranking for those terms in good spots where we're going to start to drive, traffic? When are we likely to hit that point of ROI? So
do you think, sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, go ahead.
Do you think that paid search ads potentially could accelerate this timeline, could shrink this timeline? Absolutely.
Yeah. And those two channels, do work really well in combination. So newer brands especially, it's very often a good idea to be, putting some of your spend into paid search in the beginning, whilst, organic is, increasing in its performance. Not only is that going to kind of, balance things out a little bit and start to give you some results in the shorter term. But actually, there's so much great data that you can get from paid search that can actually drive your organic search strategy. So for the last 10 years probably, Google really hasn't given us any keyword data inside Google Analytics for SEO. So you can't see which are your converting terms. But of course, with paid search, you can. So it's a really great idea, out of the gate to test your market with paid search, find out which terms are most responsive for you, which terms actually drive conversions in the greatest volume. And then you can take all of that learning that you get from paid search, put it into organic, and then more confidently execute your organic strategy, knowing full well that if you're ranking in those positions, then you're going to get those conversions and then, of course, those revenue returns thereafter. So, yeah, fully agree. It's great to utilize both paid and organic together.
Yeah, and it also helps drive traffic to your website if you don't have enough traffic to analyze potentially if the content is good, if the experience is good, the user experience is good, and UX is becoming increasingly important, right, for Google.
Yes.
Great. If we move to, I guess, I want to talk a little bit about content strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today, with the rise of content marketing, how do you approach creating content that's both SEO friendly, right, and is engaging for users, or is content that is engaging for users SEO friendly? Anyways.
Yeah, it is really. I mean, user-friendly content is now SEO friendly. So we're kind of long past the days, thankfully, now where you've kind of got to balance those two things. So in the past, and I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, there was a long period when Google was basically just doing document matching. So the users typed in a keyword. Is this keyword present in that document? If it is, it's a potential result. Then we use other signals to then determine whether it's a worthy result, backlink signals and so on and so forth. That's not the case anymore. There actually doesn't need to be presence of the keyword in the content itself in many instances in order for that content to rank, as long as Google you can infer the intent of that keyword and they understand that the document answers it, then you don't necessarily need to have it there. So, stuffing in keywords, these types of things is really a thing of the past. So what we can now do as SEOs is really kind of take a step back and go, what do my users want, right? So the place to begin there is always, what are they searching for? So that's keyword research, pretty fundamental aspect of SEO. So once you understand what users are looking for and in what volumes, you then need to understand, well, what is the intent behind that search? So not just what terms are they typing in, but actually what are they looking to achieve? What are they looking to accomplish when they put those terms into Google? So are they just looking to navigate somewhere? Do they want to transact and purchase? Do they want education, information, these types of things?
And it's not always utility, right? It's not always where can I get access to this product? How can I reach the store? Sometimes they're looking for inspiration.
Yes.
And this is where perhaps the content needs to be a little bit more immersive, potentially.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to, answer the intent and answer the intent in the most complete fashion possible. So really where Google is at, and it's probably been the case for the last, let's say, half a decade, is they're looking for content completeness, which what I mean by that is they don't just want a content piece to necessarily answer the user's initial query. They want that content to answer the initial query and then all related queries that the user may have as a result of typing in the first query.
Interesting.
So then the user doesn't have to go back from that piece of content, back to the search results and perform another query. They can get everything that they want from that content piece. So that really, as an SEO, you have to then think a little bit more laterally, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, if users are searching for, I don't know, let's say
a car. Let's take an automotive brand, for example. Right?
Yeah. So let's say they're planning their, what car to purchase, and maybe they've got a particular brand in mind or particular particular model in mind.
Yeah.
They don't just want to find a page with that model only. They probably want to understand its pricing, its payment plans, its 0 to 60 miles per hour, its comparison to other models, and all of those other questions that could come up. You want to ensure are answered by that content piece. So we give users a really kind of complete response. Now,
I would have imagined maybe Google wants the user to go back to perform another search so that they can maybe make more ad dollars, right?
Yes, well, it's an interest. Yeah, conceptually, it would be an interesting thing to
Aren't
consider.
they missing out if they let the brand do the entire work for them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Google has always said, and take with this what you want, but the organic department and the paid department operate entirely independently. So from the organics side, i.e. the free organic listings, they do want users to basically get the best possible experience.
Because at the end of the day, right, they're a product, they're a consumer product, right, and they do have competition.
Yeah,
correct, when it comes to search. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Who do you think is the number one contender for Google when it comes to search? You don't have to name one. Maybe you have a couple in your head that you want to reference to, or
well, I think we can probably tackle this by just explaining really where the direction of consumer search habits are going. Really, I mean, for the majority of the world, up until recently, Google was the search engine, right? We would all, just turn to Google. In fact, we say, well, let's just Google it. That's a term that we all use now. But if we start to think about probably some of our own consumer habits, they have changed. So I don't know what you're like, but perhaps if you're looking for something like a cafe or a restaurant, you may not turn to Google. You might go to TikTok or even perhaps to Instagram, right? If you're looking for an individual, you may actually go directly to LinkedIn and perform, an internal LinkedIn search query to find that person.
Right. Or if I'm looking for a car, for example, I'd expect YouTube would give me, the content that I'm looking for, the video and the sound of that car, right? As opposed to going to search and then having to go through a website, etc.
Yeah. And then you've got also, of course, you've got platform dominance like Amazon.
Yeah.
So if you're, an Amazon custodian and you want to, purchase something, you may just skip Google entirely. In fact, you probably will, because you've got a good idea that Amazon will have it, and you use, Amazon as a search engine. So there's many different search engines, which means when we think about search engine optimization, we can't nowadays just think Google, because things have evolved entirely. And if you want to perform well as a brand, you need to be present in all of those places, right?
What are you seeing from your end is growing from a brand perspective? Are you getting requests from clients around TikTok, optimizing TikTok pages perhaps, or Instagram pages, or YouTube? What is growing in demand, I suppose, besides Google?
Yeah.
Are you seeing any trends?
I mean, from our standpoint, in all honesty, we haven't seen a lot of requests for kind of TikTok or social search, but I know full well the consumer direction is absolutely moving there, especially when we look at the younger generation, sort of Gen Z. A lot of those are on those platforms pretty much all day, and that's what they're using to search. So I think it's probably more a case of those people within decision-making roles are probably not yet aware of where the direction is heading, and therefore, as an agency, we actually have to help educate and direct our clients, to move into those spaces, so they're not left behind, when really that shift happens, when the volumes move there. And
it shows how much there's opportunity, right, to optimize the space.
Yeah.
Unless these social media managers are SEO experts when it comes to social, they probably are, right? Maybe they have some level of expertise in knowing what content will I guess drive more organic, I guess, engagement or traffic.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Other areas are also App Store optimization as well, which I believe in the region. Not a lot of people are investing as much as they should when it comes to App Store optimization.
Yeah.
YouTube SEO as well.
And AI.
And AI.
Yeah. So
right. I have a question for this particular topic. I'm not sure if I'll say it now or leave it for later, but we can totally talk about AI and I'll see what
it's a hot topic. So it would almost be a shame or
we're definitely gonna cover AI. Let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about AI. So generative AI, right? More particularly, and I know there are other aspects of AI that are being utilized within SEO, and I'm happy to hear. I'm happy to let you talk about those. People are today increasingly using generative AI for queries.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with that? So what's your approach to that when it comes to advising brands, I guess, on optimizing their content or their assets to be there?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to probably point out is that the dominant platform at the moment is ChatGPT.
Right. Yeah.
Right. They got the
Let's start with that. Yeah.
They got the early movers advantage, and ChatGPT, due to their partnership with Microsoft, well, they're using Bing as their index. They're not using Google, and Bing's been really like the forgotten child for 15, 20 years. No one was really focused on it, but with the adoption of ChatGPT, it's becoming increasingly important for this new SEO landscape. So understanding how you're performing in Bing is a really important first step. And what I would recommend for that, again, it's probably a forgotten step for many people, is actually go and install Bing Webmaster Tools. See how your website is performing, what queries it's popping up for, in what volumes, in what position, and these sorts of things. And then, of course, you can make adjustments based upon that. The other big one is Google's response to that. What was Bard is now called Gemini,
right.
And you may start to see that more commonly in the region. It was not really present until quite recently, but you will start to see that in a bunch of queries these days. And you need to think about your responses to that. A little bit like voice search in the past. Very, very often these answers are coming from well-structured content that would perform particularly well in featured snippets and these types of search inventory. So again, typically for generative AI, users are looking to get kind of nice, quick, simple responses and answers, and kind of formatting your content accordingly will certainly help you in that aspect.
I was just going to ask you, do you need to change any of your content, right, to cater to these generative AI queries?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. You need to obviously, of course, analyze the SERPs and see what is present there. But certainly what you do need is to perform better.
Right.
Because typically, there is going to be a single answer, or maybe, and particularly in the case of Gemini, Google's generative search engine, is you'll see a more limited selection at the top, right, with occasionally links to other resources. But it certainly isn't the same volume of real estate as we see in the main web results. So you actually need to do better with your SEO now than you did in the past in order to get any sort of prominence there within this new kind of AI landscape.
Right. And I think eventually we're going to get there, right? We're going to get to a point where brands will have some form of real estate on generative AI.
Yeah.
What do you think? You think this will happen soon, or?
Well,
because I think it's a pretty interesting area, right? For I guess Microsoft
Yeah.
to invest in that space.
Yeah, I don't think we really know exactly where it's heading yet. I don't think Google's answer to AI is necessarily the correct one yet. I think typically someone that is utilizing AI for a search query wants a different type of result to someone typically performing a web search. Web search is really about discovery. AI search usage is typically either to perform a task or maybe to get, a consolidated answer. And I don't know yet whether having them both within the same real estate, which is what Google is testing right now, is necessarily the right thing. And I think they've all, almost admitted themselves that actually that test isn't really working. Specific platforms like ChatGPT, users go there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So it's more distinct and it's more clear. I think Google is trying to kind of hodgepodge these two things together.
Yeah.
And I don't think they necessarily know yet what the right response is.
Yeah.
But what you can be sure of with Google is they've got a lot of money and they've got a lot of talent and resource. I'm pretty sure they're going to work it out within due time.
I think they're too big to fail, maybe.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Cool. I also think that maybe the service industry will be the first to be able to jump on this generative AI space, right? You can imagine, like, maybe, I don't know, a wellness company, right, brand that offers wellness services could be leveraged on generative AI, right? And could come in and offer help potentially for maybe a small fee. I think these would be easier to integrate maybe on generative AI as opposed to products, because you do, like you said, I think you've hit the nail with this one, is users are looking for help to perform a task, right, from generative AI. So you want someone to offer that service for you, I suppose.
Yeah, it's definitely not navigational intent typically. Web's going to be much better for that. You want to go and get the contact information for a particular brand. Well, web search is going to be better for that. Brand will pop up. You click through to their contact page. You get in touch, right? So different uses, different use cases. I think we have to think about both, and this more kind of complex, nuanced ecosystem as we go forward. It's
gonna be an interface basically by itself, right? This generative AI.
Well, that was the point I was making with Google. At the moment, if you look at the the web results, you'll have this generative block at the top, which typically is above the main
browser
web results, and then you've got the typical web results below it. But I don't know necessarily that that's the best user experience, for the user. They typically want that use case in a different scenario. So that's why ChatGPT is performing really well, because users go to ChatGPT, they know what they're using it for. Whereas with Google, you've got these kind of two things trying to work hand in hand, and they're not necessarily working effectively together.
I think maybe the minute generative AI becomes voice activated, right? Maybe that's when you don't really need it, in the same space as your browser or as Google, right? Because on the browser, you want to see more visuals. You want to take your time to explore, to navigate, as you said, because you don't really know what you want, so you need that space to navigate and to visualize. As opposed to ChatGPT, you can just maybe voice what you need and that's it. I think going onto down that road for Google could but that doesn't really make sense.
And they have, of course, both the software and the hardware to support that. So think Android, Google Home, everything's in place for them. The hardware already exists for these voice-based, queries. They just need to work out the back-end infrastructure to then, serve that information effectively, back to the user that's actually performing those queries. So they're in a strong place.
They definitely are with this huge user base. Cool. So I'm going to jump onto Topical Authority. topical authority is a growing trend in SEO. How does technical SEO contribute to establishing topical authority on a website? If you can start by maybe explaining what is topical authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So a little like the name describes, it's about displaying authority on a particular topic.
Right.
So Google ultimately wants to reward expertise. For instance, if someone is looking for medical advice, they would rather get that medical advice, I would hope, from an accredited practicing medical doctor than they would some, guru off the street that thinks they know about these sorts of things, right?
Or who's really good at SEO.
Or who's really good at SEO, yeah.
Yeah.
Topical authority is really about building credibility and trust on a particular area of expertise. So you have things that you're really great at. I have a few things that, I know a little bit about. We want to be able to display to Google that we are authorities on those particular topics. So really topical authority is mostly driven by content and external factors like links and mentions and these types of things. But technical SEO can have an impact. And mostly that would be down to kind of effectively structuring your site so that Google really understands the different topics on which you have expertise. So thinking about the appropriate site structure, keeping your content in clear silos. So let's maybe use our medical example again. Let's say we are a general practitioner and we deal with like pediatrics, and then maybe we deal with skeletal health. What we would want to make sure is that those two areas are segmented within the website. So we've got, one kind of area, one subfolder within the website that talks about our pediatric expertise, and then one folder on the website that talks about our skeletal health expertise. And then Google can really then start to see how all of this content is related and clustered and interacting, and understand that section of the site is an authoritative resource on, that particular topic. Now, for most of us, it's probably not really too much of a concern because we're probably going to have a relatively narrow level of expertise, right? We're not going to be sort of a generalist who's, got authority in 10 different things. We're probably a lawyer, servicing sort of local businesses. Maybe we're an accountant. All of your content, should be on law if you're a lawyer, and accounting if you're an accountant. Where it's more important to consider those things is if you are, sort of a larger publisher who's, covering many different topics, and then site structure of course becomes a lot more important then, because you don't want this to be all kind of like jumbled together, all over your site. You want to have this nice clear structure so everything's organized and siloed effectively.
You can't have multiple topics under one page, or else you'll dilute your authority, right?
You start to confuse. I mean, at the end of the day, search engines are robots, so we need to make things nice and simple for them. Don't cover, as you said, 10 different topics within the same page, and even within the same section of the website, don't cover sort of multiple different areas. Keep it nice and organized and then consolidated. The other thing that I would say is that we can use kind of more advanced technical coding in order to infer to Google what certain elements of our website are about. So there's a coding language, if you like, or a common language that search engines use called structured data, which uses the language called schema. And these are basically like labels that you can apply to elements of your website to increase Google's confidence in those particular pieces of information. There is thousands and thousands and thousands of structured data attributes. There's probably 100 plus for hotels. There's probably 100 plus for law. You can actually go and take these structured data attributes, and you can mark up your website in the coding to basically tell Google, well, okay, this is an article, and this is what the article topic is about, for example. If you're in e-commerce, you can say, well, this is the pricing of this particular product. Here's the star rating. This is the product category that it's in, and so on and so forth. It just gives Google a little bit of extra confidence in the information that you're displaying, which also helps to influence the type of results that display in the search engines, and enables you to appear for kind of richer answers than otherwise you would do.
And that's when you see images in SERPs, right? You see videos, you see images, you see a little bit more information or content than just a sentence or a line or a text.
Yeah, the common ones that viewers may have noticed would certainly be the images. So we see now more commonly like thumbnail images appearing alongside the listing, and sometimes even like a carousel of images within the organic results as well. Now, it's important to mention that Google can still display those without the presence of structured data. However, if you apply structured data to your images, you can influence which images are shown.
Oh, there you
go.
go.
Then you can actually then start to actually kind of structure or design what your SERP listing looks like for better visibility, better click-through rate, and so on and so forth. The other one that I would say that's super common, particularly for like product-related queries, would be what we call product schema, which is where you see not just kind of like the title link and the little description below it, but beneath that you'll also see pricing information. So you'll see the price of the product. You may also see the stock level as well, listed in stock, out of stock. And then also, I don't know if you noticed, but sometimes you can get those star ratings, like these sort of 5 yellow stars if your product's good, 1 star if your product's bad.
Right.
But you'll see those also displayed, beneath the snippet as an extra line of information.
Right. This is beyond Merchant Center, Google Merchant Center, to display that kind of information.
Yeah, that's beyond the Merchant Center listings, which would be your product listing ads, which is paid search.
Yeah.
This is actually within the organic results. And again, it's just using this structured information to say to Google, okay, this is the price of the product. Maybe this is the low price, this is the high price if it's a product listing page with multiple products. Here's the stock level, and here is the rating for that product based upon all of the reviews that we've gathered. And if you can start to use this schema markup, on those important pages, it gives you such an advantage in the SERP itself, because rather than just that minimal information of the clickable title link and then the description, you can now start to get a real significant piece of real estate that not only takes up more space and is more dominant, but also catches the user's eye, because there's so much more information there that can draw the user in and ultimately win the click for the brand.
Right, and it also increases trust, right, with the user.
Yes,
right? It shows that you are credible, trustworthy. You've done the work, right, for Google to show all this content, these images and these videos.
Yeah.
Because people, users trust Google, right? Google has an existing amount of trust. So if they see that Google is happy with what you're offering, with your listing, I guess that helps with trust, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, think about our search habits. I mean, we're typically going to be viewing and clicking a result somewhere above the fold, and that may not be number one, because a lot of other factors influence that. If there's already some let's say relationship that you have with the brand, that you recognize it, you maybe visited the site before, you could win that click, but unless you are there and visible, then you're certainly not going to win that traffic. So very, very important to be featured.
Brilliant. Next one. What is answer engine optimization? And how can technical SEO again be applied to optimize for this trend?
Yeah, so we are seeing a shift. I think it's probably balanced out a little bit now, but we had really gone from Google being a search engine that drove traffic to websites, to now being an answer engine that could very often just display the answer to a user's query.
Yeah, and we go back to structured content, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we call these types of queries zero-click searches. So users performed the search, but they don't click anywhere because Google has answered it directly within the SERP. And there's many different formats of how these results can be shown. They can be a simple featured snippet with an image and maybe an expanded paragraph. We can have sometimes a bullet point list. In other times, we could even see things like tools displayed. If you search for a calculator on Google, what does Google show you? Gives you an actual calculator in the search results. Right. You don't need to click off to another website.
Or a translator.
The weather, for instance, is another great example for that. Over 50% of queries now are zero-click searches, which basically means that Google is keeping that traffic. Now, if you also then factor in all of the other properties that Google owns that also dominate queries that they're then sending traffic to, so think YouTube would be an obvious example. I believe the statistics are only about 30 to 40% of queries actually result in clicks to brands. So we now do need to think about not just driving traffic to our websites and trying to influence consumers' decisions, purchasing habits, answering informational queries for them. We actually now need to start to think about actually, being present within these, featured results directly within Google itself. So the most common ones that we could probably talk about would be, let's say, question-based queries that are typically answered by one of those paragraph type snippets. So I don't know. What's taller, the Empire State Building or Burj Khalifa, for instance, right? Google's not going to send that user off to the website. So in order to be within a chance of displaying for those, a few things need to be present on your website. The first one would be a very simple and succinct response to that query. Now that piece of content should start with the query itself. So in our example, which one is taller, the Empire State Building or Burj Khalifa? We'd actually have that on the page as a heading. So Google can see the question. And then beneath that, we want to have then a nice succinct response to that could then be displayed in that featured snippet result, which is typically, as a rough kind of ballpark word count, about 40 words. Right. Typically, they will display there. Now, of course, on your page, you'll then go and support that with lots more information, but you want to make sure that you get that, answer in straight away in a format that Google can just literally lift from the page and then deploy back into the search results. Now, of course, there's going to be plenty of websites that are all targeting those sorts of queries. What really makes a difference thereafter is the authority of that website and the authority of that page. So again, kind of ties back into our topical authority conversation. We need to be an authority on that area of expertise. We need to have displayed our authority by producing other related content on that topic. But most importantly, we need to have very good and high quality links pointing to that page, which will infer to Google that this is a trusted resource. This is a trusted answer to that particular query that we can trust to display within the search results. So those would be the main things that would want to be present there in order to be with a chance. And of course, all of this is determinable by keyword research. You can go and find out which queries are question based, then see if Google is displaying featured snippets for those results, and then you can go and kind of pick off this list all of those ones that you want to target, and then try and get your brand present within those listings.
Brilliant. That sums it up. So next one about backlinks this time.
No, we just touched on that. So it's a great segue.
Yeah. So Google seems to be de-emphasizing backlinks as a ranking factor. Again, how should SEO adapt to this change?
Yeah, I might challenge that
Go for
a
it.
little bit.
Go for it.
So you are right, but only to a point.
Right.
So the way that I like to describe this when we're talking to clients is like backlinks are your like entry to the party.
Right.
Once you are in the mix, then other factors start to take over.
Yeah.
So it is going to be almost impossible unless you're in a very, very low competition market to rank a page and certainly a website as a whole without quality references and quality backlinks coming from really good related websites. So to get kind of into the top 10 results, you would want to be able to kind of match, or if not better, the results that are currently there. Now, with that said, because of things like machine learning and other data sources that Google has, once you're into the top 10 results and therefore you're starting to win clicks to your page, then actually Google has a lot more information then to understand actually which result is giving the best answer to users. So the two primary factors that they would use, which is relating to their machine learning algorithm called RankBrain, is click-through rate and then dwell time. So click-through rate is Google's assessment of, right, okay, this website is in position 7. Typically, we see a 10% click-through rate for websites in that spot. However, this brand is getting a 15% click-through rate. This has to be a good result that users want. Therefore, let's start to move it up the search results. Secondly, when users start to click to that page, are they then staying there for a long time and not pogo sticking back to the search results? In other words, demonstrating to Google that they fulfilled the user search query. They've satisfied the search intent, right? So this is where things like the content quality, the completeness of that content, things that we spoke about earlier, become really, really important. But none of that stuff is going to make any difference unless Google can, in the first place, understand that the website is trustworthy and authoritative. And the best signal for Google on that topic is who else is regularly referencing and referring to that site. In other words, who is linking to them. It's the strongest signal of intent from a third-party website to another is, I'm so confident in this content that I actually want to reference and link to it so that my readers can also find it.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's not about the number of links or backlinks,
definitely
right?
not.
Maybe it's more about the authority of these websites that are linking back to yours.
Yeah, completely. So that topical authority also works two ways, right? So you not only want to demonstrate topical authority on your own website, but you want others who are equally authoritative on that topic to be referencing you. So go back to our kind of medical example earlier. If you were being linked from WebMD, for instance, to your website, and you were just a local doctor in Dubai, my gosh, that one link from WebMD is probably going to overpower 1,000 other links from any other places, because Google, we know, likes, trusts, and believes WebMD to be a really authoritative source on the medical industry. If someone in that capacity has then linked to this small local doctor, well, lo and behold, these guys have got to be a trustworthy resource. Therefore, Google can trust it to rank high. So, yeah, quality over quantity is exceptionally important.
Interesting. How would you approach WebMD though to get them to
that one's going to be a tough one. Might have used an extreme example, but you can win really authoritative links with the right approaches. You just need to have something that is so valuable and compelling that websites in those positions would want to cite and reference it. And then you need to, of course, get that content in front of it. So, we would call this typically, digital PR. So you're building assets on your website that, you know, significant authorities in the press would want to cite, perhaps because it's a unique resource, you know, proprietary data, these sorts of things that would make great stories. You can then push that out to those platforms, and you can, you know, win quality links from quality places.
Right, and this is also where the value from partnerships comes in, right? Partnering with other companies, other publishers. It could be something that you could benefit from off the back of a barter deal, maybe. I don't know, you know, with WebMD. Maybe you're offering maybe local expertise, but in return you want a backlink, I suppose. I read somewhere that partnerships is becoming the more important maybe area for businesses to invest in, right? To see growth or startups.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's some great kind of sources for this. I mean, one that maybe is an easy one for our readership to get started with would be something like Harrow, which is Help a Reporter Out. Simple platform that you can register to, that is basically kind of managed or contributed to by, you know, editors and publishers. And what they'll do there is they'll regularly post, I want an expert opinion on this topic for an article that I'm publishing. And these can be like major websites, you know, significant authorities in their space. If you can keep a monitor of that and then go, as you say, as like the local expert on this topic and contribute your opinion to it, it's a great way to get cited. It's a great way to get linked to, because you're building value, and you're offering a value exchange in your example that would make it worthwhile for those people to actually cite you in the first place.
There you go. That's the solution, or one of it. Cool. So last one before we wrap up is about content updates impacting SEO. So with content freshness becoming a critical factor in SEO, again, what are practices that brands can follow to ensure that content remains up to date?
Yeah, it's a great point. So with content freshness, I think it's also probably important to mention that certain queries require a high degree of freshness and other ones don't. So if it's anything that's like timely news-based, you know, Google's always going to kind of, you know, weigh on or display the most recent information. Other queries, though, the information doesn't really change over time. You know, we call this kind of like, you know, evergreen, you know, queries. I mean, our example before about Burj Khalifa versus the Empire State Building, unless, you know, Burj Khalifa decides to put another pole on the top of it, it doesn't really matter whether that information was published yesterday or was published 5 years ago. Google just wants to understand that that content is, you know, an authoritative and let's say accurate result, right? Now, with that said, even with kind of evergreen queries, we will tend to find that there is a degree of content decay. So when you put up your content first, you'll see that it, you know, very commonly, as long as all of the other signals are in place, it will perform, you know, really well for a good period of time. But then gradually over a period of time, it'll start to kind of drop down the search results and get a little less visibility. So we want to be mindful of that, and we want to be monitoring it. So what you can do is every 6 months is probably a good period, is, you know, check into your Google Analytics or your Google Search Console if you have those, and see which content has both dropped down in terms of ranking but also has declined in terms of traffic, and then give those content pieces a refresh. So what might that mean? It might mean that you go through that content and you first of all see, based upon the data that I've got in my Google Search Console account, what other information are users actually looking for that I haven't covered in that article. So you might see, you know, queries popping up there in relation to that topic that your article maybe hasn't covered really effectively. You can go and add that information into that initial article. You can then also update it with more up-to-date visuals, go and get the latest data sources if you cited data, and then also check all of your outbound links where you've maybe cited other sources to make sure that those sources are still the best quality sources to be citing within your article. And then once you've done that, you want to then republish that content with the same URL, no changes there, but just update the publish date. And that tells Google that, hey, okay, this article has been refreshed, it's been re-updated, now reconsider it. Now, what is great when you do that from a content marketing perspective is that you can then actually go and then promote that content piece a second time. So if you are active on social media, you can reshare it there. If you've got an email list, you can rebroadcast it to your email list like new and updated, which will also give a fresh impetus to that content, more users interacting with it. And then additionally, you can also kind of repitch that out to other influencers, site owners to maybe win more links back to that content if it's if it's been freshened and updated. And when you do that, you can often see then that the content, when it is republished and relaunched, I call it the content relaunch formula, actually performs better than the original piece, because now you've got all of these original signals that you had, maybe links that you won 6 months ago or a year ago, and then you've added an extra volume on top of that. It's now a stronger piece of content and it can perform really, really well. So just being mindful of that and watching where things start to drop, going and refreshing that is a far better use of your time typically than publishing new content.
Yeah. So content avoid meaningless content updates. You don't update content just for the sake of updating content. It needs to be meaningful, right? And you just listed maybe over 5 or 10 reasons why how you can make it meaningful as opposed to just updating the content, right?
Yeah, and don't do what a lot of people do, and that's just literally just update the publish date and maybe the date that they've got in the title tag and say it's relaunch. Google's pretty smart to that. It's not going to make a difference. You have to make significant improvements to the content piece. You should always be looking to prune and improve. And I would say second to that, in the same way that you want to be improving existing content, if you're finding that actually your content is just not resonating at all anymore, so it's getting no traffic, then maybe that's actually a case of not updating the content, but maybe actually just removing it from your website entirely, because you want to have a really tight, well-structured website that's full of great pieces of content that are all performing really well, than a high number of pages that are all just performing moderately well, because then Google sees that, right, this website is top quality. Everything here is A grade. We really want to reward this, versus just a whole bunch of average. Don't be scared to delete.
Right. Well, hopefully this doesn't mean shutting down the business or pivoting.
Well, yeah, we will hope not. Yeah. Then if that was the scenario, then maybe you've got other problems. But
right. Fantastic. Well, look, James, it's been great. Honestly, it's been very, very instructive. I want to give you a little bit of time for maybe some parting words, or maybe a shout out, maybe a little bit of information about SEO Sherpa. Where can we find you?
Yeah, the self-promotional bit.
I mean, if you like. Or any shout out for anyone. I mean, all up to you. This is your space.
Yeah. So if any brands are looking for kind of help in this area, of course, we offer SEO and a few other things as services. So aside from SEO, we deliver content marketing. We also do digital PR, which is really a kind of sub-element of SEO, as well as paid search. So if brands are looking for help there, we can support. But even if there's any brands there looking for some really good advice, we do offer complimentary discovery calls where we can see if your business is a good fit for SEO, because not all businesses do suit SEO. And we can actually work through that with you to determine if it's the right sort of use of your time, energy and money, even if it's working with someone else or doing it yourself and not working with SEO Sherpa. So SEOsherpa.com. If people just want to get a free and quick analysis of the website, we also have a website grader. If you search for SEO Sherpa website grader, you'll see that pop up, and pop your details in there. Within the space of 7 seconds, it will analyze your site and give you a list of all the issues you need to work on, and that might give you a good starting point. So those would be the main things. And I'm everywhere where there is social media. Probably the main place would be LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to connect with me and shoot the breeze, let's say, about SEO, I'd be happy to connect with them.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, James.
Thanks
for coming. Yeah,
appreciate it. Thanks, man. Enjoyed it.